Thank you, everybody, for coming to the Aaron Torres Podcast YouTube page. If you could do me a quick favor, see that little subscribe button at the bottom of your screen? Go ahead, click that subscribe button. Really does help our channel grow, our audience grow, and I really do appreciate it more than you know. So click that subscribe button. Appreciate your support. Now, here's the video that you came here for. One of the most important pieces of news in the transfer portal all spring long has really come over the last 3 to 4 days and 3 to 4 days going forward. That's because Chaz Lanier, who is one of the best players still in the transfer portal, played at North Florida this past year, averaged 19 points per game, 44% shooting from the three-point line. Well, guess what? His recruitment is coming down to the wire. His recruitment should be done in the next probably 48 to 72 hours. As he took a visit to BYU this previous weekend. He is currently, as I record on Monday night, on a visit to Kentucky, is expected to visit Tennessee on Tuesday. And we assume that we're going to get a commitment here sometime by Tuesday night, Wednesday morning, Wednesday afternoon at the latest. So let's go ahead and dive in. Let's go ahead and talk about this guy because I do believe that he is both one of the best players to enter the portal this offseason, but more importantly, I think he's kind of an important piece for all three teams that are currently recruiting him. So I want to talk about how he could potentially fit with each, but then also where I actually think his recruitment stands. First of all, in terms of the player, just mentioned it, 6'4" guard from North Florida. And, really just an interesting player. And we've talked a little bit about him here over the course of these last couple weeks, but he is a player that really essentially over the course of the early part of his college career really just did not see a ton of action. He was a guy that, and it's still kind of mind-boggling to see this all on paper, but his first 3 years at North Florida, 1.7 points a game, 4.5 points per game, 4.7 points per game. That was before the 2023-2024 season when he averaged 19.7 points per game, 44% shooting from three. And so when you look at who he is, now he went through the NBA draft process. I'll be honest, it wasn't the greatest process for him. But at the same time, it wasn't the greatest process for him necessarily. But, what I will say about it is pretty straightforward, is that while he didn't have a great draft process, while he probably isn't quite ready for the pros, that doesn't mean that he can't have a major impact on college hoops next year and the three teams that are recruiting him. And bluntly, I kind of think he's a guy that all three teams could really use right now at this moment. And I think because of it, he's a very important player. Now, listen, I don't know if he's a player that, in my opinion, is going to be I don't know that he's going to be like a Dalton Connect kind of guy, first team All-American, 1 year at whatever college he chooses. But I do think he has a chance to be very, very, very good. I think he has the chance to be like a 15, 16 point a game scorer in the SEC or the Big 12. And I also think on any given night, potentially the kind of guy that could get you 23, 24 and lead you to a victory. Now, in terms of his recruitment, a couple things. One, first off, he did just finish up a visit, or he did take a visit over the weekend to BYU. And what I'll say about BYU is that I think because of how the offseason has played out, because there's so much excitement about the previous BYU head coach at Kentucky, and there's so much interest in the previous Kentucky coach at Arkansas, I don't think that people fully appreciate what BYU has quietly done this offseason. They bring in a guy named Kevin Young, he was a former Phoenix Suns assistant coach. He was a very well-respected assistant coach in the NBA. I think he was actually interviewing for NBA head coaching jobs. And basically what happened was BYU's number one booster is actually the owner of the Utah Jazz. And he was the chicken man of Provo, Utah, okay? He basically said, let's go get the guy that I want, and we're going to give them whatever we need to fund this program to put them in position to have the highest levels of success. So you bring in this Kevin Young guy from the NBA. He has an NBA background. I actually think he's done a very good job of quietly keeping together this roster. Now, he hasn't kept everybody. Obviously, Ali Khalifa's gone to Louisville. Noah Waterman's gone to Louisville. We'll talk about Louisville here in a minute. And he's lost a couple guys here and there. But you look at where BYU was. You look at how quickly this roster could have completely fallen apart, excuse me. They've actually done a good job of keeping it together. Some of their best players, Richie Saunders, enter the portal, visits Kentucky, decides to go back to BYU. Trevin Knell, Dallin Hall, Fus Traore. These are all really good players from a BYU team that made the NCAA tournament. They all decide to come back to BYU. I have heard that there might still be a few irons in the fire for BYU outside of Chaz Lanier. I think if Jackson Robinson does come back to college, I think they're more of a factor than maybe a lot of people think. But I bring it up because the one thing that they really are missing is a dude that can put the ball in the basket consistently on like a 16, 17 point a night per night kind of guy. And so because of it, I would say Chaz Lanier is as important to BYU as he is to either Kentucky or Tennessee, even though Kentucky and Tennessee are really the two schools that are getting most of the buzz in terms of his recruitment. Now, in terms of Kentucky, he is on a visit to Kentucky right now. And listen, it wouldn't be the first time this offseason that Mark Pope gets a kid to campus and gets him committed before he decides to go anywhere else. But obviously, it also goes without saying this is kind of a kid that is a priority for Kentucky right now. Bluntly, I think I like the Kentucky roster maybe a little bit more than most people in the media. And as I've said many times, I don't criticize other media members. Everyone is entitled to their opinion. I still have Kentucky right now as a top 15 or so team. I also don't think that this second they have the dude that can go ahead and just get them 28 on any given night. Now, I don't think Chaz Lanier is a guy that's going to get 28 every night. Nobody in college basketball really is. But I also do think it is one of those situations where, like, if you can get him and you can plug him in with the group that you already have, if he can get you 15, 16 a night, probably be your leading scorer. And he also fits in very nicely with a lot of the other pieces they already have. Would fit nicely alongside Lamont Butler in the backcourt. Would fit nicely alongside Otega Owa if you want to go to a smaller 3-4 guard lineup. Would fit nicely with Andrew Carr at the 4, with Amari Williams at the 5. So obviously we know the value he brings to Kentucky. And also, we know the potential value he could bring to Tennessee as well. And so it's been interesting because Tennessee was really, when he first entered the portal, it felt like he was Tennessee's to lose. He's from Nashville. Everybody assumed that he was headed to Tennessee. It was all a formality. Things have changed, but they do, to the credit of Rick Barnes, find themselves in the mix late in the process. Again, he's from Nashville. And I think for Tennessee, there is a fit and an importance in his recruitment as well. You need to replace some of the scoring that you had with Dalton Knecht last year. Now you bring in the kid from Hofstra, Darling Star Dunbar, or however you say his name. I know I'm going to trip over his name. Vols fans are going to crush me for it. I get it. But that kid averaged 20 a game at Hofstra, really good player. But I don't think you can ever have enough scoring in this era. Matter of fact, I do kind of wonder, like, is it at all possible that Rick Barnes had his Dan Hurley moment last year, where Dan Hurley 3-4 years ago realized, I can't win every game 63-61. I need to focus more on offense. Well, Rick Barnes brings in Dalton Knecht. All of a sudden, he can win a game 86-81, and every game doesn't have to be a rock fight. And so I do still think they're looking to add more offense, and I do think he's a priority recruit for Tennessee. So he's clearly important to all three schools. What's interesting is I was doing some snooping around, talking to some people that I like and respect over the course of the last couple of days. And I think you talk to different people, you get different answers on where he's leaning. It's funny. I talked to somebody pretty close to BYU late last week. Now, this was before the visit, but they said, look, we kind of feel like we're a distant third. We get it. We know he's from Nashville. We know there's ties to Tennessee. We know Kentucky's Kentucky. And I think they thought, hey, if we can get him to campus, maybe some things will change. And I heard from some people I respect in the recruiting world that now BYU thinks they're in very good shape. Now, I can't confirm that, but I'm just here to say there are BYU people that actually feel like they're in better shape than people realize. Still think ultimately it's probably a Kentucky-Tennessee thing. And I'm just curious. I guess what I would say is this, is I would probably at this particular moment, it's 6:20 Eastern time on Monday night. I'd probably give the slight edge to Kentucky at this moment. Now, what's going to be interesting is pretty straightforward. Is do you get him committed while he's on campus, because that to me is the fascinating thing. You let him off campus. And by the way, I think the kid plans on taking all 5 visits. But obviously, in a perfect world, you blow him away. You blow him away with fit, with style of play, with everything that you're doing, with how he fits. I didn't even mention alongside Kobe Brea as well. And you sit there and say, well, wait a second now. Do you really need to go to Tennessee? Come here, be a star. You're the missing piece, whatever. Now, obviously, if he gets off campus and he goes to Tennessee, and my understanding is that as of 6:19 Eastern time, that is still the plan, then that changes things, because Tennessee has just as big of a role to offer as you do. Tennessee, listen, if it comes down to a couple dollars and cents in NIL, we know Tennessee will find out a way. And oh, by the way, you're from Nashville. You have a big role. You're coming off an Elite Eight appearance. And you have the last opportunity to make an impact as well. So to me, this is an absolutely fascinating recruitment. As of this particular moment in time, I would probably lean Kentucky. But I'm here to say just an interesting recruitment here in late May. We are now in late May, by the way, which is crazy. And by the way, we are going to keep you updated on all the portal stuff. NBA draft deadline is next week. So obviously some guys are going to decide to come back. Chaz Lanier is already back. And if a Coleman Hawkins comes back or Jackson Robinson, will keep you updated. But Chaz Lanier is the big one right now. And I'll be curious to see if Kentucky can get him committed, if Tennessee can get him committed, or if he takes a deep breath, takes a step back after taking all 3 of those visits. But fascinating recruitment, very interesting stuff.